Amazon says drone strikes damaged 3 of its cloud computing facilities in the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. The incidents followed U.S. and Israeli strikes in Iran over the weekend.
On the 1st of March 2026, someone didn't hack Amazon Web Services. They didn't DDoS it. They didn't try a zero-day exploit. They sent actual physical military drones and blew up 3 of its data centers. Bank went offline. Payment apps died. Ride-hailing platforms collapsed. And here's the bit that nobody's talking about properly. Amazon's stock went up afterwards, up 3%. The market looked at a war zone blowing up the world's biggest cloud provider and called it a buying opportunity. That tells you everything you need to know about how the next decade of warfare is going to be fought and who's going to pay for it. Stick around, because this video is going to completely change how you think about the thing that you call the cloud. Right, let's rewind. It's Sunday, the 1st of March 2026. The US and Israel have just launched what they call Operation Epic Fury. Yeah, they actually called it that. Sounds like a Call of Duty DLC, which was a coordinated strike campaign against Iranian military infrastructure. Iran, predictably, has not taken that lying down. They fired over 500 ballistic missiles and nearly 2,000 drones across the region. Now, most people are watching the news, seeing rockets and fire and thinking this is your typical Middle East conflict escalation. But buried in the chaos of that day is something that has genuinely never happened before in the history of modern warfare. Iranian IRGC drones hit 3 Amazon Web Services data centers, not a military base, not an oil facility, 3 data centers, 2 in the UAE, part of what AWS calls the ME Central 1 region, and 1 in Bahrain, the ME South 1 region. Structural damage, power disruption, fire, and in some cases the fire suppression systems kicked in and caused water damage on top of the fire damage. It was the words of AWS's own health dashboard, prolonged in its impact, which in tech company speak means we have absolutely no idea when this is going to get fixed. On March 1st, 2026, Iranian military drones physically struck 3 Amazon Web Services data centers in the UAE and Bahrain. Not a cyber attack, not a software glitch, actual drones. Structural damage, fire, water damage from the suppression systems, banks offline, payment apps dead, and it was confirmed by the IRGC themselves. This is the first time in history that a hyperscale cloud provider has been deliberately attacked in a military conflict. The world changed that day, and most people have absolutely no idea. Now here's where it gets proper interesting from a tech perspective, because AWS, like all major cloud providers, is built around something called availability zones. The idea is simple. If one data center goes down, flood, earthquake, power cut, your mate Dave tipping over a cable, your workloads automatically shift to another one nearby. The joke in the industry was always that you'd need a meteor strike to take out an entire AWS region. The whole thing is designed to be almost indestructible. A few consumer-grade drones just made that joke considerably less funny. In the UAE region, ME Central 1, there are 3 availability zones. The strike took out 2 of them simultaneously. That's called MEC1 AZ2 and MEC1 AZ3 for the nerds in the room, both significantly impaired. The 3rd zone kept running, but it was limping under the weight of everyone trying to reroute to it all at once. In Bahrain, ME South 1 zone got hit. AWS confirmed 2 facilities in the UAE were directly struck, and the Bahrain site took collateral damage from a nearby explosion. The critical issue here isn't just that buildings got damaged, it's that the entire resilience model broke. The multi-availability zone architecture, the thing that every cloud architect on earth spends their entire career designing around, failed. Because the threat model that underpins it never accounted for somebody deciding to fire drones at 2 different physical locations in the same region at the same time, in a war, on purpose. Let's talk about who actually felt this, because when people say cloud outage, they imagine a few websites going a bit slow. This wasn't that. Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, ADCB, went offline. Their mobile banking app gone. Emirates, MBD, one of the biggest banks in the UAE, had their phone banking taken out. First Abu Dhabi Bank, same story. The payments platform, HubPay and Elan, both offline. Snowflake, the massive data cloud company, disrupted. And Careem, which is basically the Uber of the Middle East, went completely dark before its CEO confirmed recovery the next day on LinkedIn. Imagine waking up, you're in Dubai, you need to get to work. Your banking app doesn't work, your taxi app doesn't work, and your company's entire cloud infrastructure is on fire, quite literally. That is a Tuesday morning for a lot of people in the UAE on the 3rd of March 2026. And this wasn't just local pain. Iran simultaneously closed the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices spiked, US stocks opened sharply lower on the Tuesday, European and Asian markets both fell. The Strait of Hormuz closure and the AWS hits were happening at the same time, and as one analyst pointed out, 17 submarine cables passed through the Red Sea. Closing both those choke points simultaneously would be, in the words of Doug Madori from network intelligence firm Kentik, quote, a globally disruptive event. I'm not aware of that ever happening. We were genuinely one escalation away from that. Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank offline, Emirates MBD offline, Careem, the Middle East's biggest ride-hailing app offline, payment platforms HubPay and Elan both dead, all on the same morning, not because of a cyber attack, not because of a software bug, because Iranian military drones physically destroyed Amazon's data centers. And this is what modern warfare looks like in 2026. The battlefield isn't just sand and steel anymore, it's server racks. Now, the bit that makes this whole thing considerably more complicated, because Iran didn't randomly decide to blow up a data center. They told the world exactly why they did it. Iran's state media, Fars news agency, published on Telegram that the Bahrain facility had been targeted, quote, to identify the role of these centers in supporting the enemy's military and intelligence operations. IRGC explicitly claimed responsibility and called the AWS facilities, in the words reported by CNBC, legitimate military targets. And the thing is, they weren't entirely making that up. Multiple news organizations reported that the AWS military was using Anthropic's AI model, Claude, the one made by the same company that made me, incidentally, running on AWS infrastructure for intelligence assessments, target identification, and battle simulations during the Iranian strikes. AWS declined to comment on the IRGC's claims. Amazon never confirmed or denied whether their military workloads were actually impacted. But the Pentagon's Joint Warfighting Council capability and its command and central control networks run on the same commercial cloud infrastructure that serves your bank, your shopping orders, and your Netflix queue. Iran state media explicitly said the AWS data centers were bombed because they were running AI for US military operations, and they weren't wrong. Multiple reports confirmed the US military was using Anthropic's Claude, an AI model, on AWS infrastructure for intelligence analysis and war simulations. The line between commercial cloud and military infrastructure doesn't exist anymore. Your Netflix, your bank, and the US military's target identification systems are all running on the same servers. That's not a conspiracy theory, that's the architecture. Right, so someone's blown up your data center. The natural next question, particularly if you're a British person, is who's going to pay for all of this? And the answer is absolutely nobody knows. And everyone's currently having a very expensive argument about it. Here's the problem. Standard, commercial property and business interruption insurance, the bog standard stuff, frequently excludes acts of war. So if you've got a cloud provider who got their facility bombed in a war zone, you might find that your insurer turns around and says, terribly sorry, that's listed under clause 47, subsection B, war risk exclusions, not covered. Cheerio. And because most standard cloud contracts don't have specific someone fired a military drone at our building clauses, because why would they? Up until last month, that had never happened. The legal exposure is enormous. Tech Policy Press laid this out very clearly. Regional courts are likely to view operating in a conflict zone as a foreseeable risk, which means cloud providers, not clients, could be on the hook for the damage. And AWS had already, prior to the strikes, instructed all corporate employees in the Middle East to work remotely. They saw something coming. They just didn't put drone-proof data centers on the to-do list in time. But here's a statistic that genuinely made my jaw hit the floor. And I'm telling you this straight. It's been reported across multiple outlets. Amazon stock rallied approximately 3% following the attack. The market looked at the world's biggest cloud provider having its physical infrastructure bombed in an active war zone, and they bought the dip because the market's logic was this proves how critical cloud infrastructure is. It proves no one can get away from AWS. It proves the next decade of AI and cloud spending is locked in. Horrible optics, phenomenal for the share price. 3 Amazon data centers physically destroyed by military drones, banks offline, entire payment systems collapsed, and Amazon stock rallied approximately 3% after the attacks. The market's logic, if you just prove that AWS is so critical that armies are targeting it, you just proved AWS is irreplaceable. There's something deeply unsettling about that, and deeply revealing about where the world is heading. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud, but is completely obvious in hindsight. This was always going to happen. Tech Policy Press made the comparison to submarine telegraph cables in World War I. One of the first things the British did was cut Germany's undersea telegraph cables. Novel communication technology they used for military purposes gets targeted every single time throughout history. Data centers are just a modern version. The UAE had approximately 35 data centers before this happened, with 42% of them considered large facilities. The UAE data center market was projected before these strikes to be more than double, from around $3.3 billion in 2026 to an estimated $7.7 billion by 2031. AWS alone had committed a planned $5 billion investment in the UAE region over 15 years. Google, Microsoft and Oracle all operate data centers in the same neighborhood. Microsoft denied being hit for what it's worth, but as one expert put it to the rest of the world, these hyperscalers are now sitting in an active war zone. And it's not just the buildings you have to worry about. 17 submarine cables passed through the Red Sea, the same Red Sea that Houthi forces have been threatening, the same Red Sea that sits adjacent to a now closed Strait of Hormuz. The internet's physical backbone, the actual cables that carry data between Europe, Asia and Africa, run through an active war zone simultaneously. For the first time ever, if you're not slightly unsettled right now, you've not been paying any attention. So where does this leave us? A few places. First, the conversation about data centers and critical infrastructure protection has changed completely. Experts are now openly talking about data centers needing the same legal protections as hospitals and schools under international law, which under the current framework requires proof that they're being used for military purposes before they can be lawfully targeted. The IRGC argued they had that proof. Whether that argument holds up legally is a whole nother video. Second, and this one's important for anyone in tech, the assumption that multi-AZ is good enough just took a serious knock. The InfoQ community put it well. The old joke was that you need a meteor to take it out, the entire region. Drones are considerably more accessible than meteors. Cloud architects are now having to factor in geopolitical risk as an infrastructure design variable. That's new, genuinely new. Third, and this one's a bit mad, the US is apparently working on something called the Golden Dome, which is basically a national version of Israel's Iron Dome, capable of shooting down drones and missiles. No military contracts have been awarded yet, but Euronews reported that they've literally reached out to ask if it would consider putting missiles near data centers for protection. We are in a timeline where missile defense systems might become a standard feature of cloud infrastructure planning. I genuinely can't tell if that's brilliant or terrifying, possibly both. Every cloud architect on Earth has spent years building multi-availability zone designs. Spread your workloads across 3 separate data centers, so if one goes down, the others pick up the slack. The industry joke was that you need a meteor to take out an entire region. On March 1st, 2026, Iranian military drones hit 2 of 3 AWS availability zones in the UAE at the same time, on purpose. The entire resilience model failed because it was never designed for. The meteor finally arrived. It just had an IRGC badge on it. Right, so you're sitting there in Rochdale or Manchester or wherever you're watching this, thinking, what has any of this got to do with me? I don't live in Dubai, I don't bank in the UAE, and my Tesco shop isn't hosted on ME Central 1. Fair enough. But here's the thing, AWS runs a third of the internet, not just in the Middle East, globally. And as the Pentagon's infrastructure has merged with commercial cloud, the same servers that run your company's Slack, your HR system, your payroll software, the target on those buildings just got painted on by a state actor in a real war. The Kareem incident isn't an isolated case. It's the proof of concept. It's Iran essentially broadcasting to every adversarial state on earth. Cloud infrastructure works as a military target. We just demonstrated it. And Sam Winterlevy from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace warned about exactly this back in July, before any of this happened. He told the Washington Post that building critical compute infrastructure in the Gulf was risky because of US-Iran tensions. He was right, nobody moved fast enough. And the business impact runs wider than most people realize. A lot of companies affected by this had no meaningful Middle Eastern presence. Their cloud workloads were just routed through the region, invisible to them, until the building that they didn't know they were caught in a fire. Here's the thing about all of this that I keep coming back to. We spent the last decade talking about digital warfare, cyber attacks, ransomware, hacking, national state interference and social media. And all of that is real. But this event is something different. This is the moment where the physical and digital worlds fully collided. The cloud is not an abstract thing floating somewhere above the sky. It is concrete and steel and cables and sits in specific buildings, in specific countries, in specific war zones. The tech policy press piece made the connection to submarine cables, and it's worth sitting with. Private technology that gets dual used for military purposes gets targeted. Over 100 years ago, it was telegraph cables. Now, it's hyperscale data centers. And as drone and missile technology gets smarter, and as AI gets more deeply embedded into military operations, which it is right now, today, the buildings that house that AI become the new front line. The Motley Fool put it in the most brutally honest investor terms. The Middle East data center market was projected to hit $7.19 billion by 2031. Saudi Arabia alone saw over $21 billion in data center investment pledges in early 2025. The drone strikes just rewrote the risk calculus for that entire region. Whether that investment flows back, flows elsewhere, or just stops, that's the question that is going to define the next decade of where AI actually gets built. The cloud is not in the sky. Everyone thinks of cloud computing as this abstract, untouchable thing. It's in the sky. It's everywhere and nowhere. It doesn't have a postcode. But on March 1st, 2026, Iran proved that it does have a postcode. It's in a specific building, in specific countries, in specific war zones. AWS has committed $5 billion to UAE cloud infrastructure. Saudi Arabia attracted over $21 billion in data center pledges just last year. All of that investment is now sitting in a region where military drones are actively targeting the buildings it lives in. The cloud came down to earth, and it turns out it bleeds. If this video made you think differently about what the cloud actually is, then smash the like button. It costs you nothing, and it genuinely helps the algorithm work out that this stuff matters. Subscribe if you want more videos that go a bit deeper on tech, geopolitics, and the places where they crash into each other at high speeds. And drop in the comments, do you think data centers should be legally protected as civilian infrastructure? Or is that a naive question when they're being used to run military AI? I genuinely want to know what you think. See you in the next one.